Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supported community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Have you ever been in the middle of a workout and felt a sharp twinge in your back or a weird click in your knee and you immediately spiraled into what did I just break? How long am I going to be out for? If so, you aren't alone. We have been conditioned to believe that our bodies are a fragile machine that wear out or break the moment we feel an ache. But what if that pain wasn't a sign of damage, but actually just a very loud, proactive alarm system that we can learn to negotiate with? In today's episode of The Healthy Buzz, I am joined by Dr. Lindsey Doan of Adapt Movement and Rehab to discuss the difference between hurt and harm, why you don't actually need to have the perfect diagnosis to start feeling better, and how to stop letting social media fear-monger dictate your training. Dr. Lindsey Doan is a doctorate of physical therapy and strength coach with over a decade of experience helping active adults navigate pain and injuries. After working in traditional clinical settings, she shifted her hybrid rehab into a training model, recognizing that healthcare often focuses on the reactive care rather than proactively building strength, resilience, and long-term capacity. Her work emphasizes pain education, capacity building, and strength-based rehab, helping clients stay active and continue progressing rather than feeling sidelined by pain. She works with clients both in person and remotely, supporting them in navigating their injuries, setbacks, and performance goals with greater confidence and clarity. Welcome to today's show, Lindsey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I would love to hear about that shift that you had from the traditional clinical setting into now this strength-based rehab that you have with helping your clients achieve their goals and progressing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, almost prudent to see where I kind of came from to get there. When I first came out of PT school, which I had the very typical, getting into PT school, I had injuries in high school and in college that led me to PT. I had an amazing PT there who really thought outside of the box. I did eventually have to have surgery for a hip issue, but just the way that he thought about pain and injuries and how he was always so looking at things from these different viewpoints, kind of playing detective, was just so cool to me. And so when he did that, after that experience for me, it was like, all right, this is what I want to do. And then in PT school, we had to make a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, I think. And I think I always thought, I'm going to be a manual therapist. I'm going to send people home with exercises. They're going to do that on their own. And I'm going to, have all these certifications in manual therapy and do passive things to get people feeling better. And how cool is that to have such an impact on their pain, right away and in kind of a fix it approach. And that is how I started. And as I did that more and more, I was realizing this isn't sticking. This isn't, helping people in the long term. I was helping people, but they were always coming back. They were always looking then for that fix it mindset. And not only was it not helping them in the long term, it was also wearing on me, both mentally and physically, and it wasn't sustainable. It was over the years that I came into some certain communities and I did more and more continuing education, particularly even with personal trainers. And I did certifications that were kettlebell focused. And I had to go through a whole, with that particular certification, where I had to pass a 5-minute snatch test and learn programming and things along those lines. And it made me such a better PT, and it opened my eyes to this world along with other communities that I was in, that, oh, wow, we can actually enact change that is much more long term. And not only are we going to help people out of pain and have that effect that we still want as a physical therapist, but we're also impacting their life on such a greater level. And it's, affecting behavior change. It's affecting decreasing disease risk later on, decreasing the chance of symptoms being bad if they do get diseases. It's improving resiliency. And so it's looking at so many other factors. And it just felt so much more aligned with who I am as a person and just opened doors along those lines. And it just expanded my world so much. And so once I really started going down that path, there was no stopping me.
I love that. I feel like a lot of people who have shifted into their own business in the like health and wellness field had this like awakening moment where they're like, hey, look, what I'm doing is great and fine, but I feel like it could be elevated. I feel like there's a missing component. There's a piece where like we're put into these little boxes sometimes in like conventional world, and like there's these limitations around what you can do. And so then being able to shift a little bit more to be like, oh, I can expand and I can create a bigger impact for longer term when I have a little bit more freedom and flexibility with what I can offer and support.
Absolutely, completely agree. It's really amazing when you see like there's not only like other systems and other options, but how you can impact like that greater good long term by giving people like the concepts of things and teaching them these behaviors and these changes rather than just being the person that's like, okay, here, take this pill or, this one thing that's going to fix you. It's like, oh, we can have such a greater effect.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, I know you often say that hurt does not always equal harm. Can you explain the science of why our brain sometimes turns the pain volume up to a 10, even though there isn't actually a structural injury?
I think immediately when we feel pain, there's so much fear there. And so our brain is going to go on our past experiences. Let's say if we've had that injury before, or if we've had a family member or a friend, or we've seen it in social media and we've seen what that's done to their life. And we've seen that maybe they then haven't been able to work or they haven't been able to continue training or pick up their kids or anything along those lines, and how it's impacted their life and how much pain they've been in. We see them grimacing, then we start to fear that, even if we haven't had that pain before. And so it becomes a signal. It really works almost like on a feed forward process, to where if the brain believes that there's going to be pain, then it will kind of create that loop. And now I want to be very clear that it doesn't mean that pain is not real and that it's only in the brain. There is so much more to it than just that. However, that is a part of it. Our beliefs, our mindset, our perception on pain does have such an impact on how we're going to feel it and how we're going to be able to respond in accordance.
The brain is so tricky. I have this with a lot of my clients as well when we're talking about even their relationship with food, and like their past experiences are shaping how they react to food now. Like whether they had a food sensitivity or they had just this negative experience with the food, or maybe even comments that were made about their body and how they now decide to fuel themselves as well. All is rooted in like some of these belief patterns in our brain that we have to unravel a little bit and be like, is this valid, or are we just going down this path of like these beliefs that actually we don't have any evidence behind to support?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's near impossible to just like unroot those with like words alone. We have to have experiences that break that feed forward cycle by showing a different pattern that can show like, oh, that doesn't have to be the case. Like that doesn't have to be the way forward or the belief that we hold on to. And so it's not always about changing beliefs at the beginning. It's about changing patterns and changing behavior maybe at the beginning. And maybe later on that will change beliefs. Maybe it won't, but the hope for me, I actually had one of my mentors in a call that I was in many months ago say that he doesn't try to always change beliefs anymore. He shows ways to change behavior, and slowly over time, people will believe maybe that that thing is now safe, but they may not even really believe that on the surface, but in their day-to-day actions, they're showing that their body isn't internalizing it so much, isn't showing that fear on the day to day. And I think a good example of this would be a very common thing is people, after they've maybe had a low back injury, are very fearful of bending forward to pick something up off the ground. And I can come in and tell someone, hey, bending forward is safe, but that's not going to do anything for them if I just tell them that. But if I find an entry point for them and we slowly work on that movement over time and we build that up, and then 3 months later, they're picking things up off the floor again, they may still come back in and tell me, oh, bending forward isn't safe, but yet day to day, they're actually bending forward and doing it. And over time, I might try to unravel that. And so that they actually verbalize and say bending forward is safe. But it also kind of depends on the person, how long they're working with me. What's really important is that they are showing the behavior and the pattern that they're doing it and their body is feeling safe with it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. The actual like concrete evidence and having somebody experience it, and their words might not match what they're actually physically able to do. If you do it over and over again, you're proving to yourself, and then eventually the words might shift and they might change. So like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, we're sneaky. Sometimes we're a little manipulative. And I don't want to say like we lie to our clients, but we're maybe a little manipulative with how we show them that their body and their beliefs don't always like actually match up with what's going on. And then over time, you can show them those differences and say, like, here, you've actually been doing it this way that actually doesn't agree with what your beliefs are. And then it maybe can like change that and change that feed forward process.
Yeah. So speaking kind of like this like mental game. So when a woman feels pain and the mental game can take off, pain is a real thing and people experience pain on different levels. And, it's always subjective to the person that is experiencing it. But how does fearing our pain actually make the physical sensation worse?
Fearing our pain can basically create this almost like block for us to then maybe work on the actual like patterning that we want to work into. And so if we're constantly fearing our pain coming on, we'll go back to the example of bending forward, then we're reinforcing and by avoiding that movement pattern. And so as I constantly avoid bending forward, my body's maybe then going to become deconditioned to moving forward. It's going to become less strong in those positions, less stable. So then it's almost creating an actual physiological change, not as well as the psychological change that we already have because we have that fear. And so that's how the fear can create that increase in pain and maybe even like an increase in long-term effects of pain, I guess I should say, because we are then playing into it to some degree. We're allowing pain to control what we're doing rather than having it be a data point and having it be something that we just are curious about, having it be something that we take into account as like oh, how do I adjust? What do I do with this? And then using that to guide our next step rather than having it be a full stop sort of moment.
Two things came to mind for me as you said that. One, I have this personal experience. I'm dealing with like the scapular pain issue, and it has almost been like, I don't want to do upper body shoulder work right now because it triggers this pain in the scapula that then triggers this pain in my neck. And so I've been kind of like, oh, I'm going to just focus on lower body. And I'm like, wait a minute. No, if I'm having this pain, it means I need to address what is causing the pain and not shy away necessarily from the movements, but really focus on like, am I doing something wrong? And mechanically, am I doing something wrong? Do I need to stretch different? Is there a shift that I need to make because my body should be giving me the feedback?
Yeah.
And so instead of shying away from doing it, I can actually maybe lean in and learn from it. The other thing that it made me think about is like when we shy away from doing something, then we start overcompensating in other areas of our body. And so now we start to maybe have new pains show up because now we're making concessions for like, oh, I don't want to do that because that hurts this. And now all of a sudden we're injuring something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Most pains come from doing too much too soon after too little for too long. If there's not a trauma, if you didn't, like have a fall that immediately landed, with like a broken bone or an injury, a sprained ankle, something like that, most injuries are really the result of too much too soon after too little for too long. And that happens to the best of us. That happens to people that are really consistent with their training. And maybe they get sick and they come back after, a week or two of being sick and they try to jump back in at the same level that they were at 2 weeks before. And their system had just been been rocked and we needed to gradually build back up into where they were at. Or maybe it's someone who, again, very, very active, very consistent with working out and training, but they try something new that is a different position, a different lift, a different style of working out that they're not used to. And their tissues weren't prepared for that particular type and movement and range, something along those lines. And so rather than shying away from it, we can kind of lean into that. We can say, like, oh, where was maybe the too much too soon? And I know before, like, where my floor was, like, I knew I could do way more than that, but this is my ceiling. Where can I find that middle ground? And more often, it's not that there's the exercise itself that's the problem. It's more often the dosage. We're doing too much of it. We're not recovering enough, whether that be between sets of an exercise, if it's with lifting, whether that be between days of our lifts themselves. Or it could be that we need to modify the range of the exercise right now, the load. We need to find a particular position and an entry point in that is tolerable for you in this moment and build that up, and then slowly build your body back up until it can tolerate, for you in this instance, maybe like overhead positions, and build that up from there.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. Hey, Healthy Buzz listeners! Are you feeling like you're constantly struggling to hit your protein goals? Like, you should be getting more protein for energy, muscle support, and overall well-being, but you're not quite for sure how to make that happen without sacrificing flavor or other important nutrients. I get it. That's why I created the High Protein Power Plan, a delicious and easy to follow 7-day meal plan designed specifically for women who want to effortlessly reach 130 grams of protein or more every single day. Now, this isn't about bland chicken and broccoli. Inside, you're going to find mouth-watering recipes packed with flavor and designed to perfectly balance your macros. Think vibrant salads with protein powerhouses, satisfying bowls packed with flavor and nutrients, and easy dinner ideas that make hitting your goals a breeze without feeling deprived. This plan takes the stress out of high-protein eating and helps you feel your absolute best. Ready to finally unlock the power of high protein without the guesswork? Head on over to becollectivewellness.com to download your High Protein Power Plan today. It's time to nourish your body, feel amazing, and discover how delicious hitting your protein goals truly can be. So when we're thinking too about the pain things, there's so many people out there, women especially, who feel that they need to have like an MRI or a perfect diagnosis before they can actually move forward. I need to know exactly what's wrong with me before I can like start the next thing. So why can getting a label, like having this degenerative disc disease or bone on bone or something even more damaging, how can that be more damaging to the progress than the injury actually is itself?
I mean, people want that because they want certainty. And like with certainty comes a feeling of safety. And we really have that belief that if we know exactly what's going on and exactly what's wrong from an image, that it can guarantee the right path forward. But ultimately, an image is one point in time, and it doesn't explain most of the time why someone is experiencing pain or how their body's going to respond to movement. And it can also be very detrimental for a lot of people because we have so much evidence out there, like so much research and so many studies out there that are showing that there's so many things on imaging that are very, very normal and that many, many people have that don't have pain. And that they don't have pain years later. So it's not like a preemptive, like this means that you'll have pain later in life sort of situation. And yet, if we see something on an image and we're having pain, then it becomes this thing that we latch onto. And it, one, almost becomes a crutch, for some people of like, oh, I can't do that because I have a labral tear, for instance. Or it becomes I need to fix the XYZ, the labral tear, which often they think in their mind means surgery before I can move forward, which we also have evidence that both of those things are not true most of the time, that there is conservative care, that there's ways forward without having to go to an extreme such as surgery, or having to hold on to that as such a cause of your pain at all times.
Yeah, I can see both sides, exactly as you explained. Like the diagnosis is almost like a validation. And I know for many women, they are seeking that validation that their pain is real, their symptoms they're experiencing are real. And so they want that diagnosis, that validation. And so for many, they think that, like, okay, I got this diagnosis, I'm validated, and now there's going to be a set game plan that I can follow, and I'm going to have this progress forward. But that isn't always the case, right? Like in the perfect world, yes, everything moves forward exactly perfect and nothing goes wrong. But how can we think about like what meaningful progress means when we don't have a 100% certain answer as to what is actually happening underneath the skin?
Yeah, great question. You can have two people that come in to see a physical therapist. Let's say they have had an image. Let's just use this as an example. And they have the exact same thing on the image it shows. Let's say an MCL sprain, the same grade in the knee, but they are two different people. They have different histories, they have different goals, they have different beliefs and mindsets. And that's going to affect their rehab and their plan forward much more than what the image says, because there is no protocol for an MCL sprain. There is no, hey, here's exactly what you should do when someone has XYZ for pretty much any diagnosis out there. Do we have certain standards for some things that might need to be done early on? Yes, but that's more so if someone has a bone stress injury and we know that they need to be off weight bearing, or depending on the location of the bone stress injury, or a fracture, or we're looking for some more of the bigger red flag sort of injuries, then yes, there might be earlier management. But the great thing is with physical therapy is that we're trained to rule those out or rule them in, and then get someone to the appropriate person that can then handle that if needed, and then we can help the rest of their body continually be training. Because that's the other thing, is people stop training even when one body part is injured, the rest of them just stops training, and we don't want to do that. But we want to make sure that they're in like an optimal environment for that area to heal. But let's say that they don't have the image and they're not sure what to do. When someone comes in and works with me, while my goal is not to find a diagnosis when I'm working with someone, my goal is to really hear about their experience and learn their story, and to find the things that they're really good at, the positions that they feel really strong in, and then to find the positions and the movements and the activities that they don't feel really strong in and that they otherwise are in pain in or they struggle with, and then to find an entry point, to find a starting point that we can then work them back into so that they are robust and that they can really build up both the things that they're strong in, but then the things that they're not as much. And we can have that area of opportunity to build on. And that's a really solid plan forward that honestly matches much more like human existence, I believe, like what we really know in both the research as well as like experience with working with people, than anything that an image can show us and anything that a protocol can tell us, because one person to the next are not the same and they're going to require different things.
Yeah, it's an individual approach. Everybody wants to have that blanket protocol and be like, hey, I found this on the internet and this is going to work for me. Maybe not. We need a little bit more of a personalized approach to a lot of this. So I want to talk about like this recovery and rehab part of somebody's healing journey, because I work with a lot of women, and there's a lot of the like bounce back society out there, right? Like, especially if you're thinking about somebody who's postpartum or they're post a big surgery, maybe a hysterectomy or a fibroid surgery or something like that. And they have a hard time with like, hey, I need to slow down to allow myself to recover and then ease back in. And they're like, I just want to go. I just want to go. I just want to get back in the gym. I just want to do. I'm like, we need your body to heal first. And so there can be this idea too that like rehabbing means that we're only doing like these tiny little reps with these little itty bitty weights, and we can never get back to the same state that we are, is going too slow for a lot of people. Can we unpack that a little bit about why that recovery process and rehabbing is so important?
I think a lot of people silo rehab and training and make them two separate things, and they're really not. I fully believe rehab and training are the same thing. They're just on a spectrum. And so, where we start on that, so especially let's say someone postpartum or in menopause and perimenopause, around those stages where things might need to shift where they're at, it's a shift. It's not coming off of the training spectrum, it's a shift on the training spectrum. And that might also be in this scenario, like shifting certain things, but not everything, right? And so it's really about finding the starting point for, let's say, postpartum, because it can depend on like their previous fitness level prior to, and then their fitness level during their pregnancy, and then afterwards. And so, where are we going to start for this person immediately after is going to depend on so many factors. But it is not, oh, you're just doing rehab. It's how can we combine rehab and training to have it. One, it's so much better, I think, on the brain and how someone like recovers when you're not like, oh, I need to do my rehab and then I guess I can go train. Or like, once I do my rehab, then I'll finally be able to train again. It's like, no, your training is your rehab and your rehab is your training. And so, with like the way that I work with clients, with many of my clients, they work otherwise hybrid or just with programming from me. And this is for rehab base. And I honestly think that they get the best results with the ones who do programming from me rather than even in-person sessions, because they're getting constant feedback. Yes, because they're, have access to me through an app. And so I can maybe review form, but more so put out little fires if they're like worried or nervous about things. They're getting a full program, but it's meeting them where they're at. And so they have, I think, a little maybe easier example to visualize would be to say, let's say an ankle sprain, but they just feel like it's taking them away from everything that they want to be doing. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to rehab your ankle. And that rehab that you're doing is going to be part of your training session where you're still working upper body, you're still training core. I'm still finding a way for you to do cardio and work your metabolic system, even though you maybe not aren't able to run like you normally do or something along those lines, but we're still working it. And we're then, getting 3 days of working out a week, and they're still getting their rehab within their training. So it's not two separate things. It's not siloed, and it's built week after week. And they have these great results because, one, they're so much more consistent. It's fun. And it's also physiologically having enough stimulus to actually create long-term change, because too often the rehab exercises are underdosed and not doing enough to create a physiological change. I think they might be creating a psychological change by getting people to feel safer. And that's important too. I think there's a time and place for those. But a lot of times the easy exercises aren't actually creating the physiological change that people think they are.
Yeah, thanks for putting that into perspective. I feel like that's really important for people to understand. I like your incorporation of rehab into the training. They're not two separate things, they can be done together. And working with somebody like you can create that programming so that they are still seeing the benefits, seeing progress forward, but not also like creating more injuries in the process, not pushing themselves too much. So then now maybe we're overcompensating and we're doing more on this foot instead of that foot because of the ankle injury, but you're actually walking them through how to keep everything kind of more in homeostasis or in like balance in that situation.
Yeah, and my hope with that is that people learn the concepts too. Like, I really hope that people learn kind of like the underlying idea of it over time. It's not just oh, here, do exactly this and do exactly what I tell you, and that's that. It's to learn like, oh, we're doing intensity-based training, and you're learning maybe what an RPE 7 feels like for this, and that might feel different on a day where you're tired and fatigued, or you're coming back from being sick, but it's still going to be an RPE 7 on that day. But on a day that you're really feeling great, you got good sleep, you've been eating well, you've been super consistent, an RPE 7 is going to feel different. And so people are learning these concepts and that they can then take with them in other aspects of their life and in training for the rest of their life, even when they don't work with me. And that's my hope that people take from it as well.
Can you explain what RPE means for our listeners?
RPE is rating of perceived exertion. And so I'll use often with training with my clients intensity-based training rather than maybe a linear progression where someone might have a 1 rep max with lifting. And then some trainers, coaches might use like, okay, do 85% of your 1 rep max. I tend to use an RPE or the inverse of it, which is RIR, repetitions in reserve. So let's say you did 8 reps of an overhead press with 20 pounds and you felt like you could only do 3 reps left before you would hit absolute failure, like you could not get that weight overhead again, then your RIR, your repetitions in reserve, is 3. You have 3 reps left in the tank. And so I will often use those two concepts with my clients because it really helps a lot more with auto regulation and them learning based off how they feel that day rather than, oh, you have to do 85% of your 1 rep max, but today you feel like shit. And so you don't want to do 85%. Like that sounds like way too much. And then you do it and you have a higher chance of maybe getting injured or burnout or not wanting to go to the gym because you're not feeling ready for it, something along those lines.
That is really helpful. So thanks for explaining that. I like
Yeah.
that. Also the RIR. I've heard of the RPE, but I haven't really heard of the RIR and using that because like you said, it does change. It can vary based on what you slept like. Were you recently traveling a lot? Have you had a little time away from the gym? All that's going to vary and your 1 rep max could change drastically from week to week,
Big time.
day to day, can
Yeah.
change day to day.
Yeah.
So, when we're thinking about pain, what should we be aware of when we're thinking about exercising with pain? Because sometimes people are like, push through the pain, but then also, are we pushing too much through the pain? What pain should we be like, hey, maybe we need to back off? So, how do we know the difference between like this pain is okay and part of the maybe training process, and this pain is a bigger signal from our body that we maybe need to pull back even more?
Great question. I tend to use like a general framework. Like if we're just looking like blanket statement of like 4 out of 10 or less is normally like a good starting point. Now, the number scale is always hard. I rarely ask my clients like what their pain level is because it's so different person to person. I find people get bogged down by it. It honestly stresses them out. And so I don't often care about that, but I do care maybe about the change from beginning of an exercise to the end of the exercise. If it increased a lot and where they felt like that increase was, that I do care about. So yeah, the general I will say is like 4 out of 10 or less is okay. The word I use a lot is actually tolerable. Is it tolerable? And with that, I think it's also important to define tolerance or tolerable because I'll have, for instance, like, not to throw him under the bus here, but my dad will, say like, oh, I can tolerate it, but he's like grimacing and pulling away or something like that with a movement or an exercise. And I'm like, no, no, no. Tolerable in this case, it shouldn't be a grimace. It shouldn't be a pull away. It should be like, oh no, like I can totally do this. Like I feel it, but it's totally tolerable. It doesn't make you change your facial expression. It doesn't make you want to pull away. It's not sharp. It's not creating those sort of like physical signs of discomfort in that way, other than, oh, this is hard. That's different, but that's where I would look at tolerable. And so if something's tolerable in general, that's okay. Now, the other thing I like to say is, well, what about the person who's already at a 4, when they're going into the gym? And so what does that person do? And for me, I will give them a 2-point scale. I will say, if you're already at a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or wherever on that scale that it is to you, again, I'm not comparing you to me, just wherever it is on that scale, then if it goes up 2 points during an exercise, but it calms back down fairly quickly after you stop the exercise, I would consider that safe. Now, if it goes up 3 points or more during the exercise, I would consider that something that we need to, in that case, be curious about. That's where we want to look at that data point and say, let's adjust this a little bit. And rather than just completely stopping the exercise, that's when I'm going to look at adjusting the load, adjusting maybe the range of motion. So if it's a squat, maybe we don't go as low, adjusting the tempo, maybe we go slower, maybe we go faster, changing the reps and sets and doing more rest between exercises. And if none of those bring it back down to that 2 or lower increase, then that's when I'm going to say pivot to a different exercise. Generally, that maybe is still trying to get the same intention. So if our goal was to get the quads activated, then let's see if there's another quad exercise that can get, you working them without pain. But if not, then for that day, then we probably need to nix that sort of movement. It doesn't mean we need to nix the whole training session necessarily, but just that pattern and that movement that is bothersome. And so I think that there's a lot more ways that we can adjust movement and adjust our training to keep people working out, to keep people moving. That doesn't just mean stop.
That is really helpful. Again, you're using some very tangible things for people to relate back to. Are we having a big increase of pain from where you're at by 2 points? Are you coming back down? Okay. So how can somebody differentiate between, let's say, pain that they're experiencing because of the exercise versus something like DOMS, the delayed onset of muscle soreness? How are we differentiating between this is actually painful because it's maybe something structurally, functionally that needs to be addressed versus this is just muscle soreness because we're using some different muscles in a different way?
One, that can kind of come down to training age and how used to training someone is. And so if someone's very, very new to training, it's definitely going to be tough. And I think that there's going to be a lot of fear involved and they're going to feel that. And it's going to be oh, I feel something and they're probably just not going to like any feeling. And so we're going to just have to ease them in. And I think that's also where how long those symptoms last can be very beneficial. So if symptoms are lasting 24 to 48 hours after, then that would likely be more in the DOMS category, more in that safe zone. Even if it is in the pain zone, it's probably still in the safer realm of us working within it. But if it's lasting much longer than the 48 hours after you've done the training, then at that point, I might be thinking ooh, this is more than that. Or even if it is DOMS, even if it is muscle soreness, it's way more than what you should be having. We did way too much of an exercise. Again, doesn't mean the exercise is wrong. It means how much of it you did was just too much for your body to recover well from. And so that's one thing that I would look at. I think the other thing I might look at, or at least be aware of, is if it is someone who is maybe more trained or at least a little bit more aware of training, is that if it is a new movement, if it's novel, if it's the first day of a new training block, having soreness, having some discomfort is going to probably occur. But what we should see is that next week, when you do that same training day, that even if you went up in weights, your soreness probably shouldn't be as much as it was the week before, because soreness is normally indicative of novel movement. If you've been consistent with things, then it is not going to get you as sore in that case. And so if it is, then it's often recovery or other issues that are coming into play there. And so I just think that there's so much more to take into account in that case.
Yes, so helpful. Thank you. But that brings me to my next point, because social media is going to give us all kinds of opinions on things. So it's going to be full of these never do this exercise or the one move to fix your back and all these unpersonalized approaches. But it also can create a lot of fear-based marketing that's going to impact a woman's confidence in their bodies. And how can we spot the fluff out there, the fear mongering, the things that are okay, stop listening, mute that channel, please.
Yeah. I mean, anytime that there's a post, I'm very nuanced in my word choice. It's one thing that I both struggle with as well as am, I guess, proud of in some ways, but it also makes me always have to take a second to be how do I want to word this? And in social media, that makes it hard because, of course, you want to get your message out there and you want to reach more people because you have good things to share. But at the same time, what plays is the short clicks and the things that get through to people quickly and the big hooks. But realistically, the hooks that are like fix your back pain with XYZ exercises, anything along those lines that seem too good to be true or that seem like, oh, I'm going like a quick fix sort of post or idea, those are going to be the things that I think we've kind of just got to nix and kind of have got to just scroll past and move past. I also personally think that a lot of these things that are so women and like so based of like a cycle syncing and like you've got to train differently as a woman and things like that, when physiologically we really don't, is problematic, and it's fear based and it's kind of predatory, in a lot of ways with marketing. And so those are also the things that I personally have had to unlearn and scroll past and learn to move past, even with all the education that I have. And so those are a lot of the ones that I'm just like, all right, these are not helpful because there's not nuance to them. So if something seems too easy and too simple, it normally is because it is. If there's not nuance to it, if it's not individualized to the person in front of us, then that's the answer right there, is that you as the consumer have to realize that your story is different than another person that's reading this. And yes, there might be things that you can take from it, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. It can't be, oh, that's the exercise that I'm missing. It has to be taken with a grain of salt and learn to build upon that and find little bits of it and find the good in it that you can, but not like have it be the end all be all.
I think what is really important for movement, for nutrition, for wellness in general is that people are looking at the information that they're consuming with like a critical eye and not taking everything as like, this is going to be the answer for me, but rather taking that information and be like, how is this going to maybe support me in my journey, and how is it maybe not supportive to me in my journey? Like, everybody is such a unique individual, and I know that like accessibility is one thing, affordability is another thing when it comes to some of this stuff. So yeah, it is nice to have some of the different free resources out there, but then also thinking about the context of how this actually is relatable to you in your specific situation, because everybody is so different.
Yeah, but there's so many free resources and things out there that also aren't like fix your back pain with XYZ. There's so many ways to present things that can show that there's more nuance to it. And I think that there's a lot of content creators and a lot of influencers out there that do this really, really well and that show that. So I think that there's also those out there that are just doing it for other reasons,
The clickbait, it's all clickbait.
The clickbait. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I completely agree.
Well, I really enjoyed our conversation. I think this is really impactful for people to understand the difference between rehab and recovery are not different. Rehab and training are not different. All of it is intermeshed, and that each individual person is going to be on their own journey, especially when it comes to pain and understanding what that pain is rooted in and how you can adjust and understand and learn from the pain versus like trying to shy away from it. Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know when it comes to everything we talked about today?
I mean, I think we really hit the big points there. I really think that, not all pain equals damage. That's what we're looking at. We really don't need the perfect answers to make meaningful progress. And, there really just isn't that sharp line between rehab and training. And I think that I truly, truly believe that everyone has capacity to improve, like whether they're in pain or they're having limitations, and no matter what their current situation is. And maybe they're not ready for it now. Maybe there's physiological blockers, maybe there's psychological blockers, things like that. And I do think someone needs to be ready in that case. But I do truly believe that with, the right starting point and the right guidance and the support, that you can like at least continue to improve some like function and how you feel in your body and how you feel in your mind, and that safety. And so I think that just kind of like that hope that there is other options out there and other ways to look at pain and injury and function than a lot of what we've been sold is really important.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, how can people connect with you? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. The easiest is probably just on Instagram. So that's at DPT Lindsey D. And then also through my website, which is www.adaptmovementandrehab.com.
All right, everybody go give her a follow and connect with her, especially if you're dealing with some pain issues and you're wanting to overcome this pain. Get a little personalized training and rehab. Lindsey's going to be your person.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.